Hi, this is Alvin, and welcome to the Kickstart Commerce podcast, where we share search marketing and domain investing strategies to help grow your business. In today's episode, our guest is Deepak Daftari, a longtime domain investor, serial entrepreneur, and angel investor based in India. Today, Deepak and I discuss how developing online portals for headhunting and education paved the path to full-time domain investing, how cornering the .co.in market led to birthing and refining of bulk portfolio buying and selling of premium domains for Deepak. Also, hear how Deepak drives sales by limiting renewal length and aiming for quality rather than quantity. Deepak also reveals his 50-50 approach to bulk domain portfolio investing as well as angel investing and domain brokering. And last but not least, Deepak insightfully shares a handful of his latest domain sales, his strategy when pricing domains to sell, as well as just what domain investors can expect in the global market as well as the local Indian market when buying and selling domain names. So with that, Deepak, welcome and thank you for making time to join us today.
Thanks, Alvin. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to talking on the show for quite some time now.
Yeah, certainly. So to kick things off, Deepak, briefly share at a high level with our listeners a bit about yourself, who you are, your personal and professional background.
So I've been a domainier for a couple of years now. I think almost 10 plus years now, but that's not how I started my journey. I started an education portal, an online learning portal in India, and at the peak of it, I think we were one of the largest. And then we signed it off to another player, and then I started a headhunting firm, and we used to headhunt for some of the largest tech giants who have their back office in India. So we did that for a couple of years, and then I think since the year 2005, I stepped into domaining, but really started serious domaining probably 3 or 4 years down the line from there. And you can say probably 2008, 2009 was when I really started full-time domaining.
Wow. So when you say education portal, like what type of topics were you covering?
So we were helping students prepare for online entrance exams. So MBA, medical entrance exams, they are a huge thing in India, and there are millions and millions of students who take these exams for a limited number of seats. During the time I started was the time when the Indian education system was taking these tests slowly from the offline world to the online world, and people really did not have a clue how the online system would work. So we created a test engine which would actually create a mock-up exam the exact way that you would be doing on the D-Day. So we created that kind of a platform with a question bank, and we help students prepare the journey from the offline world to the online world and get them ready on a subscription-based model.
Wow. And then, like, how many subscribers did you grow it from and to?
So finally, when we spin it off into a separate company, I think we had a subscription base of almost 2 million users in India, and a sizable chunk of them were paid subscribers. So that was a huge business at that point in time when the internet space was just about opening up in India. That was the year I think 2000.
Now, did you have any prior experience in terms of before
Wow.
you actually launched that education portal? Like, were you familiar with online, or was that kind of your first foray into online?
Straight off college, and I started my own business. I
Wow.
had a rough idea about the power of internet because I studied in Australia. So when
Okay.
I came back from Australia, yeah, the penetration of the internet vis-a-vis in Australia and India was a huge difference between the two countries. So when I came back, I saw that this is the next wave, and that's when I took my first business online and had the conviction that it's going to really take off because that's the way I saw things moving forward.
So from there, so that educational portal, like, how long did you run it?
It still goes on, but it's on autopilot. But the other it's the other yeah, business people who take care of it now. But I ran it actively for 5 years till it reached a run rate of 2 million subscribers, and then I spinned it off into another business because I then jumped into my second big business, which was the headhunting business.
So I guess, are you still doing that headhunting business today, or?
Oh, I shut it down. I shut it down in the year 2015. I shut it down because it was getting too competitive, and there
Uh,
were a lot of players, and it was just getting too much. Plus, the domain business was growing very rapidly, which required a full time.
Gotcha. So you went from the education portal into really headhunting, and then now, how did you make that turn or that intersection with domain names? Like, when did that come across your radar?
So that happened by fluke, by chance. In till 2005, you couldn't really register a domain name in India. the two primary extensions in India .in and .co.in. Until 2005, it was a manual intensive process if you wanted to register a domain name. But in the year 2005, the government decided to declutter the space so that anybody and everybody with an internet connection and a credit card could get a domain name. That when I back ordered a lot of names and I ended up with a very valuable .co.in portfolio. I was the original registrant of domain names like internet.co.in, law.co.in, technology.co.in. A lot of these names were cornered by me, and when I finally sold off that portfolio, that's what gave me the initial capital to build my portfolio, the domain portfolio which everybody sees today. So it all started from the $1,000 which I invested in 2005, and that's the capital I've invested till date.
So you started then basically 15 years ago in 2005, kind of cornered that .co.in market. And then now, how did you, I guess, work your way up in terms of stepping your way into .com investing?
So I took that portfolio and I approached some of the largest players in the US market who wanted a piece of that action, but couldn't really get those domain names because they were not aware that these domain names were coming out. And then I sold a majority chunk of that portfolio. And then I started reading more and more on it. See, me selling that portfolio was more like fluke because there was somebody interested in getting that, and I was the only one with a certain set of domain names which they were interested in. So that was more not a business decision. It was more like a luck favoring me kind of a thing. But then when I really started reading into the industry, it got me interested that this is a real viable business which is backed by data points, and it's not that you would just go and register a $10 domain name and overnight it becomes rags to riches. That's what still the general perception is. But once you go deep down and you dig into the matrix and you see the data points, then you get to know that it's a data backed process. If you spend the time to understand the process, if you spend the time to understand the data sets, if you spend the time to understand it as a business, there's more to it than a $10 registration using a credit card. It's a totally science, different factors. But once I started treating this as a business, it opened my eyes. So then I took that money, which came from the .co.in portfolio, and I took a big decision and I bought, you won't believe it, I bought three number.com names.
So how did that even come to mind? Like, because most people would say, okay, well, I'll just focus on words, but for you to kind of go, okay, well, let's just kind of narrow this down to go three letter. Like, where does that kind of come from in the thought process?
I was reading all these blogs. There used to be DN Forum, there used to be Name Pros, there used to be a couple of other places, and then I was reading the three letters and three number.coms. So rather than three letters, I went for three number.coms. And Traffic used to be the conference during that time, and Monica used to run the online auctions. So that's where I made my first big ticket purchase of, if I remember correctly, four three number.coms. And the ones I bought, I remember correctly, I bought them for 6,500 each. And I sold them on Cedo a couple of months down the line for 9,300 a piece. Had I not sold, each of them would have been at least $250,000 each today. That's the way I built this business of buying and selling. And then once I got rid of the three number.coms, I went into three-letter.co.uk. So there was a big portfolio of 650 three-letter.co.uk, which I bought in a chunk from one of the then famous brokers of the industry. And then I started selling them on Acorn Domains, the largest platform, the forum for .co.uk. And I sold majority of my domains there, multiplied the money a couple of times, and then by doing this over a period of time, and then I made two big disasters of my domaining career till now. I invested in .mobi and .asia. I burnt a lot of money, but valuable lessons learned, and then from there on I just stuck to .coms.
Interesting. Now why do you think that .asia, .mobi were not successful?
To give you an example, I think I had almost 2000 Asia domains and
Wow.
I sold two. And they were $60 a pop for 2 years. That was a
Ooh.
lot of money. 60 euros, I think so, if I'm not wrong. And everything was dropped after 2 years. I just managed to sell two. Dot Mobi was a different story. That was a story of greed. I had a very valuable .mobi portfolio. probably if you search the internet, one of the biggest portfolios among the others. And there were during the hype, the crazy peak of the dot mobi scenario, there were a lot of good offers which I could have taken and made a couple of $1 million. But then as greed takes over, we are all humans, and when the graph keeps on going up, we think we'll make more, and then it all crashed suddenly, and you won't believe, after a couple of years I dropped everything for a big zero. But overall, I broke even. But that taught me the lesson that money in pocket is any day more better than money on paper.
Oh man, that is so true, and I think that that's probably at least a good percentage of the domain investing population that that tends to be the challenge is, well,
Yeah.
do I take the offer today, or you hear, versus something like I think Rick Schwartz, he just recently had a sale like GoBet.com that was netted him something like $850,000. So
Yes.
you hear things like that, and so people like, well, I have a similar name. So do I take the 3,500, $7,500, or do I try to wait and pull the proverbial Rick Schwartz move, to try to net six figures? Like you said, I mean, it's one of those things that depending on the name may have a short shelf life. And so you gotta get what you can while you can versus just sitting there waiting, and then it's like holding on to a name like DVD or something like that. It's like, okay, well, yeah, there may be other industries with the acronym DVD, but in terms of DVD today, it really means nothing, as opposed to streaming. You match both of those up, and likely is the case, streaming.com is going to be way more than DVD, although DVD, like I said, outside of the comparison of both of those being mediums, DVD, obviously, it could go for way more, but it would be likely a different industry that would pull the value upward rather than downward. But yeah, you're
True.
so right.
That's the biggest lesson I learned, that irrespective of any extension, things will come and go. .com is here to stay.
So coming in 2005, really kind of getting domains on your radar, you dip your toe in, begin to develop a process. So then, in terms of your process and strategy, like, when did data start becoming important, and when did you start actually using that to make decisions on what you purchase and at what price, also when you sell and at what price?
I think it was more like towards 2010 when I became really serious with my domaining journey and started treating this as a full-time business and not as a side hustle.
Mm.
That Because I have a personal philosophy that if you try to do something, don't do it as a side hustle. Do it with full conviction, as if you're running a fully funded 24/7 business. And unless and until you do that, the sincerity, the seriousness of it doesn't come within the business, you really are not going to succeed if you keep taking it as a side hustle and not really serious with it. So that's the time when I started acquiring names as a portfolio. And when I started doing that, I made a theory that I'm going to have three buckets for all the names I acquire. One is a long term bucket, which is when I get the ideal price, which is like a retirement price, I'm going to sell it at that point in time only. So nothing doing with that. There is no compromise with those domains. Then there's a middle bucket, which I typically buy for anything from $10 to $500, and these domains typically say for 5 to 8 years time frame, but they give me a five-figure return. And then there are the foot soldiers domains, which I buy with anything from $10 to $200, which typically are the bread and butter of my business, and they sell any day and every day between 2,500 to 5,000, and which give me my cash flow of acquiring more and more inventory. And once in a while I have outlier, and then I use that money to buy a bigger, better domain name and either put it in a middle bucket or the bucket which is the long term bucket. So that's the theory I follow.
Now, with your mid to long term domains, now do you renew those? For some. So, like for instance, myself, I have certain names that are I won't sell them likely in my lifetime. It'll be with my kids, and so with those names, I tend to renew them at sometimes 5 to 10 year stretches. Do you take that same approach in terms of your renewal strategy?
I think the max I've renewed a domain name is 3 years in advance.
Mm.
I look at it this way. It's a thought out decision that If it sells, why to give somebody a approach that I have renewed it for 10 years, so I have no intention of parting it with for a long term. See, many times it happens that before GDPR, we used to go through the voice data, and when we see a domain name which is registered till 2020, 28, 2025, that gives me a psychological input that the guy is not really too keen to sell or has a different purpose. See, these are basically psychological games which we play in our own mind. I might be totally wrong, but it puts me on the back foot. So for me, if it's a really valuable domain name, I renew it for 2 or 3 years, because I go through my list every day. I go through my portfolio almost on a daily basis, so I know what's coming up for renewal in the next 1 month, and I renew them in advance. But that's the philosophy I follow, that I don't want to put anybody on the back foot and make them already have a wall in their head that okay, this guy might be a tough and not too inclined to sell, because everything sells, it just has to be the right price.
Right, indeed. Everybody has a price, and certainly, if you call the right number, then you're certainly willing to let go of it, or even purchase it,
True.
just depending on what that price is. And so, like now, how has your strategy evolved over the years in terms of, because you, like you said, you were buying portfolios and you've mastered having a strategy that has a long term, mid term, short term bucket. Like how is the ebbs and flows of your domain portfolio in terms of its size and quality? How has that evolved over time?
I think quality wise, as you mature, as you progress, as the sales data from your own sales plus the sales data from industry references like DN Journal, Name Bio, and all keep on coming. It's an ongoing journey, Alvin. I see it this way, that the more we dig deeper, the more inputs come in, and the more refined your strategy is, provided you are willing to put in the time. So I take it as ongoing journey. But it has helped me define my portfolio into a much shorter one, but a more valuable one. Now I only acquire a couple of domain names a week, but they are really strong domain names, rather than the strategy of acquiring a lot of names before, which was the quantity versus the quality game. Now I like to play the quality game. I would rather
Mm.
have a portfolio of just 800 names, but with the 800 names, the annual turnover which I'll achieve can beat anybody with 8,000 names. So that's my strategy now, and that's evolved over a period of time. Now I buy very selectively, but I buy names which I see a potential upside of anything from 5,000 to 50,000, which helps me have a more leaner approach, easier to manage, and it's something I can take a decision on the spur quick. I can move my portfolio direction quickly, which wouldn't have been possible had I had 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 names. Maybe it might be not a good strategy for the long term, but I'm building my portfolio slow and steady.
Now that makes complete sense. And so you're, like you said, you literally started out probably leaning more towards the quantity side,
Yes.
and we all know that the by leaning that way, the quantity then ultimately impacts the quality as well as the time that it takes to either sell a domain, versus now you're leaning more towards the quality of a domain, whereas your quantity is likely lowered, but then the time to sell is probably, I would imagine, a bit quicker than the former.
Yes, it's certainly the case. But see, you have to see the important lesson I learned from my previous two businesses was cash flow is king. Many a times when we grow our portfolio to 3,000, 5,000 domain names within a year's time frame or 2 years time frame, what happens is the renewals pile up really fast. And before we realize, we start taking decisions based on the payout which has to happen for the renewal of the domain names. When you have a leaner portfolio, you don't need that money really that much, because one good sale might cover the renewal cost of the entire portfolio. So then the rest is gravy. The rest doesn't compel you to take decisions because you are in a cash flow or a tight crunch. So that's been a theory, that if your cash flows are taken care of, if your renewals are taken care of, and your life sustenance doesn't depend on what you're earning, that's when you can take decisions more based on a free mind and a free will, and that's when you can extract maximum value out of a real portfolio.
Right. And I would imagine that having a lean
Yeah.
renewal strategy then also offers the flexibility in terms of even purchasing private sales, as well as probably even participating in expired auctions.
True. See, again, the cash flow strategy has helped me so brilliantly is that I've always maintained that there should always be a sizable kitty that you keep for unseen, unforeseen events which might happen. To give you a very pertinent example, 4 years back, I came across a portfolio which was being sold by one of the prominent brokers in the industry, who's a good friend of mine, and he gave me an option to have the first dibs on the portfolio because I had the money, because I had the cash flow. I was the first one to acquire, and these were some of the best domain names I have purchased ever till date. One of the domain names I can tell you, co-founder, I just recently rejected a $500,000 offer which I had shared on Twitter some time back, which was over a period of 4 years. But it's the kind of cash flow which gave me the opportunity to acquire that portfolio, wherein one domain name might have an offer of $500,000. That's the kind of opportunity we should always be prepared, because you don't know what's coming at the next corner. If you have the money, you're going to have the first dibs on some of these portfolios.
Is there a rule of thumb that you use in terms of what percentage you allocate for, reinvesting into the portfolio versus renewals versus just kind of set aside waiting for those type of purchases?
I do. So every sale I make, I invest 50% back immediately into the domain business, which is an ongoing business. 50% I set aside from every sale, which is a part of the strategy of squirreling money. Because this is another of my personal philosophy, that if you keep making money and keep putting the entire money into the same business, there's no personal upside to that business. So that's where I keep in a separate kitty, you can say, and that what helps me, that there's a huge opportunity which comes up. If I have the money, I can immediately put in, or I can utilize the business, as I also do angel investment. So I get a lot of companies coming to me with wonderful opportunities, and from this money which I keep and set aside at 50%, I do value investing in some of these angel investment in the upcoming tech sector, and I've had a couple of exits with a couple of good times multiples what I put in. So that's where my excess savings go in.
Interesting. So then in terms of angel investing now, how has that opened up opportunities for you to be able to purchase sell domains to up and coming companies?
Oh, that's another story. So when I was doing domaining and I was doing angel investments, I've been pretty active in the space. I've been pretty active with the Chamber of Commerce in my city. I've been pretty active in a few entrepreneurship organizations which are famous worldwide, like Thai.org. Due to my connect with this and due to my investing background, I have been friends with some of the largest VCs in India who are very active investors writing a sizable check into these companies. So because they know me as somebody, for them they hardly know anybody who plays at this scale in the domaining world. So I have been a first call of point of reference for some of these VCs when they want to acquire the .coms for their companies, for their investee companies who might be on a .co, .io, .net, .org, .in. And because they trust me, because of our friendship over these many years, I've been their first point of reference, call, help, a retainership to acquire assets for their companies, which helps them, which helps me, because somewhere I'm invested also in these companies. And if these companies get more branded, more better, I get paid for that. Plus, I get upside because the company also grows.
Right. And so that's an interesting, so you really find yourself really not only as a serial entrepreneur, not only as an angel investor, and not only really as a domain investor, but also it seems like you play in that realm of brokering as well.
Yeah, but that's for a select group. See, because the problem with the Indian domain space is that because it's growing, it's in a very nascent stage.
Mm,
There's too much to filter. So unless and until you keep a cap over a certain limit, it really is not worth the while. So if you really want to play, then it makes sense that you broker in the 5 figure 6 figure range and play accordingly. I have been into the brokering game for some of the largest companies in the US tech space.
in terms of your domain portfolio, I think you mentioned that you had a portfolio size of something like 800 domains.
Yes.
And so out of that, what's interesting to me, like now, are you redirecting or pointing those domains to sales landers, or are you parking any of those? Like, kind of what's your strategy when it comes to how you manage your domain portfolio in terms of, are they sales landers? Are they not even resolving, or, are they parked? Kind of what's your strategy there?
So 90% of my domain portfolio, which has very minor traffic in terms of 100 or less visitors a month, they are on dan.com, and the balance are on bodies and
Mm.
parking crew. So that's the mix. 10% which make good parking income, they sit on bodies and parking crew, and the balance 90% pay on Dan, which is I think in the recent times a very good platform. Apart from that, I list my domains on Afternic, on Uni Registry. You can put your names for sale even on parking crew, on bodies. So whichever the options, I list them everywhere. Cedo, but the primary sales channel is Dan and Afternic.
How has Dan changed your ability to sell domains?
I think that was a much required impetus in the industry. So since Dan has been there, it's almost doubled my sales
Wow.
because of the plain and simple landers, the low commission of 9%. If you import a lead, just 5%, and it's a very simple interface. People come, people land, people see. They can interact. It's a very clean and clear system. The back end is stress free. So I think Dan has been really a breath of fresh air for our industry. At least for me, it's really doubled my sales since the time I have migrated my domains on that platform.
Now, in a given week or month, like how many sales are you producing or realizing?
So as I said, I have a smaller portfolio, so I don't make a lot of sales, but whatever sales I make, they are quite good in terms of the turnover of the portfolio. So in a good month, I might have 5 sales. In a bad month, I might have 2 or 3 sales, but most of my sales are 3,500 to 15,000 range.
Right. Now, I had a chance to check out your Twitter profile, not portfolio, but profile, and saw that at least for 2020, it looks like at least the latter part of this year, you had started reporting some of your sales that were online. And so I documented at least a few of them and saw, like, back in what was it, July, that you sold workfromhomesolutions.com,
Yes,
which
yes.
is a phenomenal name in terms of it being 4 words, but you sold it for $5,555. And so, kind of, what was the backstory on that domain?
I saw that name. I liked it, and I think I undersold. I not had it on a bin price, I could have easily sold for 8 to 9 grand. But then you win some, you lose some. I had bought it for $175. I think just a few weeks back, and it was there on Afternic, and I think Afternic or Dan. I'm confused. So one of the two platforms, it really sold very fast. So that was like zero effort. You buy it, you put it there, and it just sells.
Now, do you think that its sale played a lot into just kind of what we've lived through in terms of everybody being forced online due to COVID?
Definitely, definitely. See, otherwise, a four word.com selling for that kind of money,
Right.
it's really tough. But given I checked later on, the other permutation combinations for that combination of words were all taken, and nothing was available for less than 10 grand.
So that's interesting. So you had it set to a bin price, a buy it now price. Now, I guess, was it just one of those that you just set and you just kind of forgot about it, or you
Yeah.
just
I just put in, and I should have done my homework before putting the pricing in. So that was a lesson learned, that I got a bit lazy, didn't do my homework, and but still it's happy. I bought for, I'll just check. I think I bought for $175, and I sold it for that price. So not a
now?
bad ROI.
So then, how did it come across your radar? Was that something that you went out and looked for, or just how did you stumble upon it?
It had a good CPC. So typically, I go through domain lists every day. So I the primary tool I use is expireddomains.net,
Mm.
and I go through the pending deletes. I go through the inventory at Namejet. I go through the inventory at GoDaddy auctions. These are the three venues I keep looking at every day. And I think the reason this one jumped up was the CPC was good on that, and that's the reason I think so that point in time I acquired it.
Nice. Now, I also saw that, what was it, in September, you sold the businessoflife.com for $3,333. Now, what's significant to me about this one was that you purchased it in 2012 for $31.
Yes.
So I mean, you basically, what is that, 100 times multiple, or a little over that, um,
I
which is
always
phenomenal.
liked that one. I always liked that one. The business of life is got that catchy slogan, sales marketing pitch kind of a thing, more towards the motivational side of things. So there's some names you just like the ring of it, and I never got rid of that one, and it sold.
So now one thing that kind of struck me about both of these sales, in terms of your pricing, like, do you often use the same number in four, 4 times, 5 times in a row? Is that something that you do on a normal basis? So, like, with the business of life, it's $3,333. Work from home solutions, $5,555. Is that something that you do in terms of your pricing, or kind of what's your strategy when you price?
So it again depends upon the kind of names I have, the bucket I have put in, and to a certain extent the addressable market for the domain name based on that. But I keep reworking the prices every quarter based on the sales data which keep on coming in. That's the simple mantra I follow.
Interesting. So then you could find yourself changing prices then at least every, let's just say, 60 to 90 days then.
See, I'll share the on the pricing front also. Many a times we underestimate a domain name.
Mm.
Recently, fourletter.com, which I had posted on Twitter, but then the buyer did not want me to put it, and I removed it, which I sold for a five-figure sum. I wouldn't have priced at that one, but the earnings and the traffic on that one made me re-rate that. So it's really a lot of combinations which play the traffic with the domain name. If something happens which is relevant to the industry of the domain name, if the matrix of the business itself changes and that niche becomes like with electric cars, with Tesla becoming the stock going like over the dock, the rocket, the electric, the domains in the electric car segment have rocketed after Hiren Patel sold a name for six figures. So there are a lot of metrics unless and until we keep redefining the prices on our names. I think we have to be at our feet every time, taking new information and keep repricing them.
Yeah, because if not, and then you could wind up in those situations, and I've had it happen, to where, I had a, health name that I had, kind of sat and forget I forgot it, and it ended up selling for something like $1,500 that I probably could have gotten 3 to 4 thousand for. Not, but it's also dependent upon, like you said, unforeseen things happening, like COVID. COVID hit. I for basically, name was not even on the radar, and it while it sold and it was a hand registration, that's great, but again, I left a lot of money on the table. So yeah, so I think that just goes to the point of, like you said, you're reviewing quarterly, basing it on that data, and then adjusting, accordingly.
See, to give you example, Rick reported yesterday go bet 850K. I just checked my portfolio last evening. I have betting club, which is not that bad a name. So I would certainly reprice a name like betting club. Maybe it might not sell for the price range I might aspire, but definitely I'll double the price.
Right. So even if it was, let's just say it was $75,000, then in juxtaposed to Rick's sale
Yeah,
of 850,000, you could easily say, well, I could easily, go to 150,000,
true.
200,000, just based upon the, I guess you'd say, proximity of location to Rick's sale, or proximity to Rick's sale.
You have a data point to share with a potential buyer, because then you can show something which has almost similar value, and you can based on it that hey, this might be outlier, but there are future buyers who might be willing to go for that price. So if you have a price point to base your decision on, the buyer might simply ask you what's the data point you are using to quote me that price. Now that you have a data point to show the price point, the explanation to your asking price, at least you have something to base that upon.
Right, and
Yeah.
it's pulling you further north than south, which is a good thing. And so now, another sale that struck me as an odd one was in October when you sold HoustonFuneralHome.com for $4,888, and it struck me as odd because one, my wife is from a city just north of Houston, that's Conroe, and so at one point in time, I had ConroeFuneral.com, ConroeFunerals.com, but here it is. I look and you sold HoustonFuneralHome.com, a 3 word for nearly almost $5,000. Like, kind of what goes through your thought process? Because that's a Geo-service domain. And to a certain extent, I would look and say, man, if I can own HoustonFuneral.com or HoustonFunerals.com, like, I don't know that Houston Funeral Home makes much sense. Like, help kind of walk us through at least your thought process for what made you purchase it and then how you set the price on it.
You won't believe I actually lost $2,000 on that sale. Can you believe that? And I'll come to this story. So I get a mail out of the blue from one of the uni registry brokers. Again, sheer laziness on my part is I had priced it at Afternic for 4,444. So I forgot that because this again was a pretty old domain name. I think I had it for I think 5 or 6 years because of the high CPC. Not those many global searches, but the CPC was really high on that one.
Right.
And I priced it and I just forgot about it. And I get a mail from a uni registry broker that, hey, we just sold Houston Funeral, and the buyer might be looking at other similar names, and you have Houston Funeral Home. If you confirm, then we can pitch the domain name to them. So if you can give us a price. So I forgot the price at Afternic and I gave them a price of 7,500, and then I forgot about it, and in a week's time I get a mail from the broker that, hey, I had the buyer at 6,500. He had climbed to 6,500, but for what reason I don't know, he went to Afternic, he saw that domain for 4,444, and he actually bought it then and there when he was actually ready to pay to 6,500 to the broker at uni registry.
That's interesting because I actually had a name like that to where a GoDaddy rep reached out to me and I actually responded and told him, I was like, hey, you know that the domain is actually listed on a Dan.com lander. It's there, it's buy it now, it's priced. I said your buyer can actually go out and I think the domain was listed something like 39.95. Now I was willing to go really as low as 2,000, but basically responded. I told him, I said, I tell you what, if your buyer, I said, if I can net basically 2,800 from it, consider it sold. And he's like, I don't think it, I don't think that the buyer will do it. And then the next thing I know, it was sold. And so like I've had that same scenario to happen, but uh, more so, I guess mine was more intentional than yours, where yours is kind of like, no, we wanted you to purchase it at the 7, not the 4. So that
True.
is that's interesting, and that's a strategy that I often use sometimes is that I will set a domain higher, like on a Dan page, if contacted by a broker, and just say, hey, either you can purchase it for that, or I may knock $1,500 off. But in most cases, like I already know if let's say if I want to net 5,000, I may put a domain, as high sometimes as 8,500, 9,000, knowing that okay, if I get anything in between, anything really 5,000 or more, then I'll be happy. But yeah, that HoustonFuneralHome.com, that struck me as one that was odd, and I was just like, man, I said, I don't know that I would have priced that as high, but like you said, there was some other factors involved, like CPC, so me not knowing just the cost per click behind it, but just at a general level of thinking of just saying it's a geo service name. Most of those names, like you hear things oftentimes, well, geo service, you'll probably only get anywhere from $350 to $750. And so to see one sell at this, I mean, says a lot. And so obviously you're breaking the mold here of saying that while that may be true, there are cases like yours that may be anomalies.
Yes. See, there's
So
another example. If you would want me to share, I
yeah,
got this domain name which I think reported on Twitter, lifegrowsgreen.com, and I think I sold it within 1 week of acquiring, and there was only one end user, which was in the weed, the medical cannabis industry. They had the exact site on a .inc extension. I bought this name for $79 just on a hunch, and
Hmm.
they approached me within a week, and I sold it for 3,500.
Wow.
$79 to 3,500.
A week flip.
Yep.
I guess when you go after a domain like that, obviously the most domainers are you looking for companies that are on non.com extensions in that case?
Certainly, yes.
Mm,
Certainly, yes. Because the company might be growing, the company might have funding, the company might be in expansion phase, they might be opening new branches. So as I said, as the business of acquiring new domains becomes tougher and tougher because the price for the generics is going through the roof in the drops in the auctions, you need to work harder, more smarter, and look for the names which nobody else is chasing. That's where you make your money. See, as in business, the saying is you always make money on the buy side, not on the sale side.
right.
So as long as you can buy names which others are not really looking at and not bumping them up, I think that's where you'll make your real money, which keeps on adding up. If you do this over a period of time, it really adds up to a nice kitty.
Definitely. Now, I mean, obviously we've talked about some of your .com sales. Now, you've had some interesting non.com sales as well. As of recent, because I think you sold friends.biz. I think I saw on Twitter a few days ago.
Yes.
What goes through your mind to go, yeah, friends.biz, that makes sense.
I remember picking it up from a GoDaddy auction last year, I think so. When I was checking these metrics and I saw friends.biz, I saw the word friends is registered in 350 extensions,
Ah,
350 plus, and I just got it for $30. So that was more like a lottery ticket that if it sells, it sells. It's still a generic TLD extension, and for $30, I think even if I sell it to one of the domain forums, that's something which I can recover any day and every day. So that was just more like a fun kind of a stuff. And the buyer approached me and said $1,500. That's all I have. I said if you pay me in 2 days, it's yours. And I created the buy now price on Dan, and they went ahead and they paid for it, and it was done and dusted. So sometimes you buy these names just for the heck of it because it's a generic extension and it really costs you peanuts and it's worth the risk. I put it that way. It's worth the risk.
when you put it that way, it seems to me, and this is probably a great lesson for listeners just in general, of hearing you speak about your strategy. You're in a mindset of how do I limit and reduce, if not eliminate, risk altogether to create, an upside of the 100 multiple or the 100 times multiple or really any sort of three-figure multiple. And that's just something that one, it takes skill, it takes experience to know what to look for, what the attributes are, the signals, if you will, that are signaling you. Now we've changed this multiplier from 5 to 10, now it's gone from 10 to 50. So that's something that it's like hearing you speak that I pick up on. It's like that's kind of your, how do I limit risk while increasing the multiple.
See, it more depends upon the kind of risk you're willing to put in, the kind of money you're willing to put in. If you have access to a lot of capital,
Mm.
either you can go and buy whatever you want at whatever prices is available, or you can wait for the right moment, keep on trying, and buy a select few, but at the right price. See, to give you a small understanding of how much work it now makes with so many new investors, on a typical day, if I'm going through the list from a list which is a couple of thousand, I might maybe pick up 30 to 35 names which I decide to choose and chase. And then I load them in the backend system, or I put my bids into GoDaddy or NameJet or Snap Names or Dropcatch. And then whoever catches them. After going through that and after shortlisting the list to just 30 or 35 names, in today's market, I'm still losing 99% of my auctions. Just imagine the kind of work which is simply going down the drain. But I'm still willing to work for that 1% because I know that 1% which I'm going to acquire is from a select list, is at a price which I want to pay, is not overpriced, and will definitely sell for a high four figure or a five figure price. So the cost
Uh,
of portfolio which I'm building is maybe the speed is slow, but the cost is really low.
That is interesting. And so then I guess are there extensions like that you don't touch? Because obviously you've had .com, .biz, .net, .org. Like, are there extensions that you just kind of pretty much stay away from? Like, do you invest in any CCTLDs or no?
Nothing, nothing. I just had three biz domain names. One I have sold. I still have two. That is also I bought last year. Otherwise, I wouldn't have touched .biz. So I would say 95% of my portfolio is .com, and the balance 5% is equal between .net and .orgs. So
Gotcha.
that's
So really then your non-coms, it's more about a quick flip,
yeah.
more than it is just really kind of holding on to it then.
Yeah, and another space I'm really bullish about and I really like is the .co.uk space. So
Hmm.
I'm also one of the largest portfolio holders of two-letter .co.uk's. So I have quite a few of those as well as one word .co.uk's. Like I recently had an offer of I think $40,000 on peach.co.uk. I have names like modeling.co.uk, surrogacy.co.uk. So I am still bullish on the co.uk space.
Now, what makes .co.uk special in terms of how you view it as an investment?
Certain markets are very specific to the country specific TLDs. Like with Germany, they are very specific with .ds. Even if it is with a hyphen, I've seen names with three hyphens. You would never believe somebody having a website on a domain name with three hyphens. Trust me, I've seen it and it's a pretty popular site. So with Germany, they have absolutely no inhibitions with the hyphen. But as far as possible, 99.99% they'll like to stick with the .de extension, unless and until it's a multinational company, wherein they'll also have a .com, but the primary site will be on a .de. So
Mm.
similarly with France, it's .fr. The same connotation applies to UK. As far as possible, 99% of the times they will try to build their site on a .co.uk space, and I've had some great success with selling domain names in that space. And the way I see it, I bought those two-letter.co.uk's, I think 6 years back or something like that. And I will probably start selling them in another 3 to 4 years. So the day I bought it, I saw that it's almost a 10-year wait cycle, but I was willing to wait that much after I paid a sizable sum of money. So that's my horizon. I put it in the long-term bucket that in 10 years' time, I'll sell my first two-letter.co.uk. So that's when they start maturing.
So now, and it makes sense that obviously if you're local to that given country, then obviously you can kind of keep up and keep tabs on everything. Now, obviously you're located in India. And so like, how do you keep up with what's going on with .co.uk? Like, I mean, are you following publications? Kind of how are you keeping up with things in terms of the ebbs and flows, the pricing of what's going on with the .co.uk market?
I think the biggest lever, one word, is the internet.
Mm,
So as long as you're willing to spend the time and research, it's all out there. So there are forums which are dedicated, just like we have name pros today. There's acondomains.co.uk. There are a couple of sites where they have these auctions regularly, exclusively for .co.uk domain names. So if you just read in the normal post, maybe go there once a week, once in 2 weeks, just read everything, just read the sales data. I think that's the best education you can give to yourself free of cost.
Now, in terms of just 2020 and COVID impacting the domain industry, kind of what are your thoughts there in terms of where does the domain industry go from now? It has obviously COVID has impacted the world in a negative manner, while at the same time it's also forced a lot of businesses online. And so, kind of looking forward from 2020, like where does the domain industry go from here?
See, it's only northward. Although COVID has been a personal tragedy for so many of us have lost friends, relatives,
Right.
elders, neighbors. But on a business front, I think this has changed the perception. Traditional businesses used to think that life's not possible beyond if there's not a door for one to walk into. I think that mindset has now been broken, and now that more and more companies are looking at viable options of either getting online or going on to the next phase or expanding their business. I think it has been a blessing in disguise, especially for the domaining industry. And We are heading into the price zone which have never been heard before, especially for good quality keywords. And I think the prices are only going to move northward from here.
Interesting. And then in terms of just the Indian domain market, like kind of what's going on, kind of where's the pulse at today?
So over the last 15 years, the .in and .co.in space has matured. So there are now five-figure sales regularly happening in that market, which are getting reported in dnjournal.com also. As an end user market, as I had shared in a few interviews a couple of years back, the market is really maturing now. You
Hmm.
might have heard the Indian company Z.com just bought Zee.com for 700,000. Even 5 years back, this would have been unheard of, unthinkable. I think the starting of this year, helped the fourth largest company, software company in India, with a market cap of $4 billion, acquire a four-letter.com for their business, and they paid a princely sum, which wouldn't have been imaginable for them a few years back. So the end user mentality of Indian companies is definitely changing, and now they are opening up. They are more than willing to pay five-figure and six-figure prices for their exact match domain name, which they wouldn't even have thought of 5 years back. So that's how the mentality is changing, and that rapidly.
Interesting. And now, what does that mean in terms of like, how are you seeing the domain industry within India? Are you seeing a new crop of domain investors come along there in India? India, is it growing just as well on that same trajectory?
Huge. I think the influx of new domainers is defined by one word, huge. There are tons and tons of people who are getting into this industry. See, but as I say, there's a lot of fluff in every industry, until the point that they start treating this as a real viable business, most of them will lose money, because
Mm.
for still the average domainer is, I'll buy a domain name, I'll flip it, make 2x, 3x. The quantum is what defines your staying power in the industry in the long term. If you buy a domain name for $10 and sell it for $20 and $25, maybe it will give you instant gratification and happiness for the next 10 minutes of your life. Is it real business? No.
Right.
Can you do it 1,000 times? If you say yes, then it's a business. Otherwise, you're just having a good time. You're making some side money, some pocket money. Be happy with it. So that's what is going to happen with 95% of the new crop. They're going to come, burn that money, not really understand the business, and then move out of the industry. But the 5% who are able to stay back are going to make a good career out of it.
And then and you hit an interesting point because there are many folks who are kind of fly by nightish, if you will, in terms of there's no longevity there. It's a matter of I came, I made, I went, and in short order in some cases. And so when you think about things like NamesCon, so obviously rewind this clock back 11 months ago, and you and I we were in the same location. We were in person. I mean, we got to actually meet there in Austin. Here we are 11 months later, and we find ourselves in a total different world of having to virtually meet online. Like, how does that change things in terms of the domain industry of like NamesCon really having to move online, and then even moving forward into 2021? I mean, what does that look like or what do you think it looks like in terms of it impacting the domain industry? So, like having a hybrid event, and in person as well as a virtual thing, all in one. Like, how does that change the industry?
See, I think that was a brilliant decision for the simple reason that people who travel from other countries, especially from South Asia to US,
Hmm.
that's a hefty cost. Forget about at least for me, it's a 40-hour door to door. By the time I leave my house, by the time I check into my hotel, it's a 40-hour journey, three flights. So for some, it's two flights, but and maybe 30 hours door to door. And that also not only the time implication, it's a huge cost given the international airfares, the currency fluctuation, the price difference, the hotels, the meals, everything, the transportation. So every time somebody decides to make a journey, it's a sizable decision for the average domainer in this part of the world. Now, with a $59 admission fee and access to all the rooms, the lounges, all the sessions, I think it has brought more value, more content, more opportunities for people to learn. from some of the best, the brightest, and the most successful in the industry, and get to share their knowledge in the comfort of their house without any additional cost, at their comfort and at their convenience, which they can hear again and again because these are recorded sessions. And I think that's a brilliant opportunity for people to listen and learn and upgrade themselves by listening to some of these people who are sharing this knowledge basically for free.
Yeah. And so, like with yourself, because obviously having as much experience as you have, like what does NamesCon bring you? Like, what value does it bring to you, your strategy, and just your overall vision for where it is that you see yourself going?
So I go there for two reasons: the network I make and meet old friends. I think once a year, the or twice a year, the travel to US is worth, because I get to meet so many old friends, make a new network. See, my personal philosophy over the years have been that you never make business in a conference. You make the connections, you make some friends who are lifelong, and business happens later on because you've made all these connections. So go there, have a good time, chill, and meet friends. Look at the way we talked in namescon, and today we are here speaking virtually over a session which would have never been possible had there been not a physical version of namescon.
Indeed, indeed. Now, like long term, then, in terms of where you see things going for yourself, like what do you think's on the horizon? Just what do you see looking forward into 2021?
I think oneword.coms are really going to get more pricier. The drop auctions are going to get really, really expensive for the average guy. But what I also see is the next set of domainers are going to concentrate their energy either on the long term, long tail domain names, or the lesser extensions, which is .net and .org, because there are still plenty of opportunities in that space, and there's still money to be made in the drops in that segment.
Nice. Well, then wrapping up, one of the last questions is, what would be your advice to someone, that's starting their journey into domain investing, domain development? Like, where should they start, in your opinion?
I think if somebody wants to be in this industry, I would seriously advise them to 6 months just sit and study. It can
Mm,
be DN Journal, it can be Name Bio, it can be Name Pros, it can be the wealth of knowledge which we have for free. The blogs, the podcasts which you do, there are other podcasts, there's so many blogs, and all this is basically for free. Absorb as much as you can. Never sit and cry that I was not there in 1999 and I didn't get this, I didn't get that. See, crying never solved any problem. It's your out of the box thinking, how you think different from the
mm,
majority of the people, which is going to set you apart. And if you can bring that 1% of a differential thinking, it is what is going to set you apart. Barriers are always going to be there. If you think differently, and if you take that barrier as an opportunity, I think nothing will stop you from having a success in the domaining industry. We have so many examples from the new crop of domainiers like Yogi Solanki and others who really came out of nowhere and have had, I think, $25,000 of sales. And there are tons of names which drop, which nobody even looks at. Uh,
great.
so there's always opportunity, but invest your time in learning, in researching, in learning the tools of the trade. Never blame the trade. If you put in the time and effort, there's always an opportunity in anything you do. Treat it as a business, and success shall be yours.
Indeed, and you mentioned Yogi, and obviously Yogi has hit up on success, but that's not been without hard work
True.
of outbounding. And so, like, now, do you find yourself now? Do you outbound any or no?
I haven't, because there are two reasons. I'm lazy, the biggest reason. Uh, the second reason is that I have a strong philosophy that if you outbound, the art of negotiation says the ball is already in the court of your opponent. If you
Mm,
want to exact the exact price or a higher price, if you expect to extract the maximum possible juice from your domain name, that's when the other person is in your court. That's when the other person wants the domain name for his business at your terms. My
right.
personal philosophy is that's when you have the best price possible, which is not at all. With outbound, maybe you'll sell him at half your asking price. Given the lengths I go to acquire my names, and it being a small portfolio, I don't think I would be willing to do that if I need to extract the maximum possible juice out of that portfolio.
So that makes complete sense. And you also have to look at everyone's circumstances are different. Like your circumstances are different than a yogi's, but you're doing what suits you best. And that's the thing. It's kind of like you got to find your own lane. So I guess last but not least, I mean, is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners, how they might get in contact with you should they have questions from this interview?
So I'm there on Facebook, I'm there on Twitter, I'm there on LinkedIn. All three mediums are easily accessible. My email ID is Deepak_Daftari@yahoo.com. I still have a Yahoo email ID, so don't laugh over it. Again, as I said, I'm too lazy to change my email ID, so feel free to hit me up, and I would try to answer to the best of my abilities.
Well, certainly. Well, with that, Deepak, we're out of time. So, Deepak, thank you again for joining us today and sharing your entrepreneurial as well as your domain investing journey.
Thanks for having me on your show, Alvin. It's been really a pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Kickstart Commerce, where we share search marketing and domain name strategies to help grow your business. Please subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or Podbean. Last but not least, please visit kickstartcommerce.com to subscribe to the newsletter sharing tips and tricks about the disciplines of digital strategy. Thanks, and that's all for now.